Pause for a moment and consider that thin, light piece of paper in your hand. What if it didn't exist? What would the world be like? Laws were inscribed on heavy stone slabs, wisdom was preserved in giant clay tablets, and thoughts were whispered only through words, from mouth to ear. Paper, indeed, is one of humanity's most humble yet revolutionary inventions. It's so common in our daily lives that we hardly even notice its existence. This silent revolution is the story of that elegant surface that carries the memory of civilization on its shoulders. Now, let's turn the first pages of this story together and take a journey back to those ancient times. When humankind discovered writing, they initially turned to whatever they could find around them. The first major step was taken in the fertile plains of Mesopotamia around 3200 to 3000 BC. The Sumerians turned to the most accessible material at their disposal to keep records of trade, administrative documents, and religious texts: unbaked clay. Making clay tablets was extremely simple, yet extremely effective. Fresh clay was shaped in the palm of the hand, then marks were pressed onto it with a pointed reed pen. The tablet was then either dried in the sun or baked in an oven for greater durability. The robustness of this method is truly remarkable. Tens of thousands of clay tablets that have survived to this day have preserved trade agreements, tax records, legal texts, and hymns intact. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest known literary work in history, has also survived thanks to these tablets. Baked clay acquires a durability that allows it to withstand even moisture and fire. Indeed, during the Great Fire of Nineveh in 612 BC, thousands of tablets from the Assyrian library, far from being destroyed, survive to this day in an even more hardened state. But clay was heavy and cumbersome. It ruthlessly limited the amount of information a merchant or diplomat could carry with them. Therefore, civilizations in different geographical regions began to seek alternative solutions. In Egypt, an aquatic plant called Cyperus papyrus grew in the reeds of the Nile Delta. The plant's thick, fleshy stem, when sliced, contained a dense, fibrous pith. From around 3000 BC onwards, the Egyptians cut thin strips from the sap and stacked them on top of each other in a crisscross pattern, one layer horizontally and the other vertically. While still wet, they placed a heavy stone on top and compacted it. Once dry, the stickiness of the starch, a natural sugar within the plant, formed these strips into a single, flexible, and writable surface. The result: papyrus. Papyrus was lightweight, portable, and ink could be easily applied to it with a reed pen. It could be rolled up, folded, and easily stored. The Library of Alexandria, the most comprehensive repository of knowledge in the ancient world, consisted largely of papyrus scrolls, and it is believed that these scrolls contained numerous texts, ranging from the lost works of Aristotle to the geometric studies of Euclid. However, papyrus also had serious weaknesses. It rotted in humid climates, became brittle in the cold, and its production primarily required the unique climate and vegetation of the Nile Valley. This geographical monopoly sometimes became a significant political tool. This fragility paved the way for the development and spread of parchment in the kingdom of Pergamon in Anatolia. Parchment takes its name from this city. The Latin word Pergamena is derived from the city of Pergamon in Anatolia. In the 2nd century BC, the Library of Pergamon was in open cultural competition with Alexandria. During periods when papyrus became difficult to obtain, artisans in Pergamon turned to animal hides. Sheep, goat, or calf hides were first soaked in lime water to remove the hair, then stretched over a frame to dry, and finally thinned with pumice stone to smooth the surface. The resulting material was far more durable than papyrus. Writing on it could be scraped off and the surface reused, and writing could be done on both the front and back. The greatest contribution of parchment was that it made the creation of the Codex possible. The rolled papyrus had to be unrolled from the beginning to reach the desired line. Moreover, it tore when folded. Parchment, however, was resistant to folding. Thus, parchment sheets were sewn together between two covers, creating a form similar to today's books, the Codex. Now pages could be turned, Specific sections could be accessed quickly, and text could be highlighted. As Christianity spread, most sacred texts were reproduced in parchment codice form. This preference made the format standard due to both its durability and ease of use. For centuries, parchment reigned supreme as the carrier of knowledge in the Middle East, Europe, and Central Asia. But much further east, centuries ago, something far lighter and cheaper had already been invented. In China, writing was inscribed on bronze vessels, bone fragments, and later on silk fabrics, starting from the 2nd millennium BC. Silk was extremely expensive. Bamboo or wooden sheets were heavy and cumbersome. In 105 AD, during the Han Dynasty, a court official, Cai Luan, detailed the papermaking methods and materials used in a report he submitted to the emperor. Therefore, Cai Luan is credited in historical records as the inventor of paper. However, archaeological findings present a different picture. Excavations in Gansu and Shaanxi have unearthed fragments of paper dating back to the 2nd and 1st centuries BC. Cai Luan's main contribution was not invention, but standardizing quality and process, making paper usable on a state scale. The production process was highly unique. Old scraps of cloth, fishing nets, hemp fibers, and mulberry bark were thoroughly soaked in water and pounded to create a fibrous, dough-like mixture. This mixture was poured evenly over a fine mesh bamboo or wicker frame. The fibers spread evenly across the surface, the water drained down, and a thin layer remained. When this layer was dried in the sun or over a gentle fire, a writable, light, and relatively inexpensive surface was obtained. Paper was an invention that gave new meaning to waste materials offered by nature. China guarded this technique strictly for centuries. Paper manufacturing remained under state control, and this powerful carrier of information remained a Chinese privilege for a long time. However, secrets cannot remain hidden forever. In 751 AD, the Battle of Talas, which took place in what is now Kyrgyzstan, pitted the Abbasid forces against the Tang dynasty army. The battle ended with a decisive Muslim victory, but the true contribution of this clash to history lies not in what happened on the battlefield, but in the caravans of captives. Among the captured Chinese warriors were skilled paper makers. The Abbasids took these craftsmen to Samarkand and had them teach paper production techniques. The first Islamic paper mill established in Samarkand ignited a process that would change the course of world history. Samarkand paper quickly gained great fame. The brilliant intellectual revival of the Islamic world owes, in part, to the dissemination of this new material. State-supported paper mills were established in Baghdad at the end of the 8th century AD. The Beit al-Hikmah, or House of Wisdom, which ruled during the reigns of Caliph Harun al-Rashid and later al-Ma'mun, put this monumental translation project, which involved translating ancient Greek, Persian, and Indian texts into Arabic, onto paper. Medicine, mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, geography, all these fields proliferated, were preserved, and disseminated thanks to paper. Ibn Sina's medical encyclopedia, Al-Kanon Faytib, and Al-Khwarizmi's Kitab al-Mutasar, which laid the foundations of algebra, none of these could have reached such a wide audience due to the high cost of parchment or the weight of clay tablets. Paper spread to Egypt, then to North Africa. In the 10th century, it reached the Iberian Peninsula via Muslim-ruled Andalusia, and in the 12th century, it reached Italy. The city of Fabriano in northern Italy has become Europe's center for paper production. The craftsmen here have introduced a significant innovation to the process: watermarking. By pressing thin wire motifs into wet paper pulp, hidden markings are created that become visible when held up to the light. This technique served both as a signature of craftsmanship, certifying quality, and as a security tool in the fight against counterfeiting. France began producing paper in the 13th century, followed by Germany and other European countries in the 14th century. Europe now possessed this material. But possession wasn't enough. A revolution was needed to make this material truly functional. In medieval Europe, knowledge was like a treasure hidden behind locked doors. The books were created with extraordinary patience by monks working in the dim, dark rooms of monasteries, solely by candlelight. Copying a work from beginning to end by hand could take months, sometimes years. In fact, owning a single Bible required as much wealth today as buying a luxurious mansion. Knowledge was a privilege accessible only to the clergy and nobility, while the common people admired it from afar. In this frozen world, the person who would trigger change was Johannes Gutenberg, a jeweler from Mainz. He was not only an inventor, but also a visionary entrepreneur who could foresee the future. While literacy rates were slowly increasing in Europe, the supply of books lagged far behind this growing demand. Gutenberg foresaw that mass-producing information would both fundamentally change the world and create enormous commercial opportunities. Gutenberg didn't invent the printing press overnight. He was a genius who skillfully blended two completely different worlds. Having worked with metals for many years thanks to his profession as a jeweler, he was intimately familiar with coin minting techniques. With this experience, he developed the idea of producing durable metal letters that could be used repeatedly. His greatest inspiration, however, came from a surprising source: the famous vineyards of the Rhine Valley. While observing the heavy screw mechanism of the grape press, an idea occurred to him. Using the same principle, he could apply strong and even pressure to inked letter plates. This way, the letters would be printed clearly and distinctly on the paper. Gutenberg created a perfect alloy by mixing lead, tin, and antimony in specific proportions. This mixture was both sufficiently hard and easily melted and shaped. Molten metal was poured into small molds, and after cooling, it emerged like tiny, gleaming figurines. The letters were identical, had clear edges, and lasted a long time. He arranged them row by row in a wooden frame, applied a special oil-based ink to them, and then used a screw press to create a strong, even print. Once the page was printed, the letters could be easily removed and reused for the next page. In the East, the movable type system was already known in China and Korea. However, the limited number of letters in the Latin alphabet allowed Gutenberg to make this system much more practical and efficient in Europe. By 1455, the first major work to come out of its printing press was the famous 42-line Bible. This was not just a book, it was the spark that ignited one of history's greatest knowledge explosions. The knowledge had now transcended the monastery walls and was ready to reach the mind of the man on the street. Paper played a vital role in this process. Printing was also possible on parchment. Indeed, a small number of copies of the Gutenberg Bible were printed on parchment. But animal hides were extremely expensive, limited in quantity, and unsuitable for mass production. Paper was cheap, abundant, and by the 15th century it was being produced in many European cities. Printing and paper complemented each other perfectly. One without the other on this scale was unthinkable. As Gutenberg's printing press continued to operate, the darkness of the Middle Ages was slowly giving way to the light of the Renaissance. By 1500, printing presses were operating in approximately 250 cities across Europe, and millions of volumes of books had been printed. The number of manuscripts produced in all European monasteries during the previous millennium was surpassed many times over in a single generation by the invention of the printing press. Information was becoming democratized, not yet fully, but the transformation was undeniable. The results were stunning. When Martin Luther posted his famous 95 Theses on the door of Wittenberg Church in 1517, the document had spread throughout Germany within weeks thanks to the printing press. The Protestant Reformation could not have taken root so quickly without printing technology. The scientific revolution also owes much to paper. Copernicus's model of the universe, Galileo's observations, Newton's laws, all of these reached broad scientific communities simultaneously. Thus, it became possible to test, discuss, and cumulatively advance ideas. Nation-states standardized common written languages on paper. Newspapers created a new phenomenon called public opinion. Constitutions and international treaties gained legal value as written and reproducible documents. In Asia, however, paper had become a vehicle for political and economic transformation much earlier. Paper money was first used in China during the Tang dynasty. During the Song dynasty, this practice became the official currency under the name jiaozi. This was the first state-managed paper money system in history. This practice significantly reduced the weight and cost of trade, transforming long-distance economic relations. When Marco Polo described the system to Europeans at the end of the 13th century, most readers considered it a figment of imagination. However, the system in question was a reality, operating China's vast trade network with the most sophisticated tools of its time. The adoption of printing in the Ottoman Empire came much later. The first Turkish-language printing press was established by Ibrahim Mutafarrika in 1727, almost 3 centuries after Gutenberg's invention. The reasons for this are still debated among historians: the resistance of calligraphers' guilds to competition that threatened their livelihoods, the technical difficulties of typesetting the Arabic alphabet in movable type, the social prestige of the manuscript tradition, and reservations about the printing and reproduction of religious texts are among the factors that stand out in this debate. On the other hand, Ottoman madrasa and dervish lodge libraries largely continued to function through the tradition of manuscripts. However, the delay in the invention of printing is considered one of the factors that fueled the widening knowledge and technology gap between Europe and the Ottoman world during the 18th and 19th centuries. Paper consumption reached unprecedented levels in the 20th century. Offset printing, mass journalism, the packaging industry, educational materials, bureaucratic documents. Paper had become an indispensable infrastructure of modern civilization. Hundreds of millions of tons of paper are produced globally each year. The raw materials for this production were largely sourced from timber forests. The paper industry's contribution to deforestation and water pollution became a concern for environmentalists in the second half of the 20th century and remains a globally debated issue today. Today, digital screens seem to have taken over many of the historical functions of paper. Emails have replaced letters, e-books have replaced novels, and PDFs have replaced reports. Some circles are declaring the stock's collapse, but this assessment may be premature. While paper consumption is declining in some areas such as newspapers and magazines, it continues to increase in packaging, hygiene products, and specialty printing sectors. Paper, the quietest hero of history, carries the memory of civilization on its shoulders. It carried the sacred texts of religions, the laws of empires, the formulas of scholars, and the verses in which poets poured out their hearts. A Chinese discovery became a bridge of knowledge for the Islamic world and a tool for transformation in Europe. Ideas were formed, revolutions were planned, and wisdom was passed on. And behind every line, the echo of a millennia-old yearning can be heard, the human desire to express oneself to another, to leave a mark on those who come after. Paper was the most elegant response to this request. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment.